So I'm so happy that we have this amazing panel lined up for you today to discuss gender diversity and if it's really a problem in geoscience. So we've put together a great panel of government, academia and industry, bringing you some personal experiences, hard facts and research, as well as company approaches. So our panel to chat about this is Helen Degeling, the Director of Minerals Geoscience for the Geological Survey of Queensland, Carolyn Tiddy, an Associate Professor in the Future Industries Institute at the University of South Australia, Rachel Durdin, General Manager of Sustainability at Rio Tinto, and Rick Valenta, the Director of the Bryan Mining and Geology Research Centre at the Sustainable Minerals Institute. So it's going to be a great session. Please use the chat. If there's anything that you would like to have discussed but aren't comfortable, you're welcome to message me privately, or you can use the Q&A anonymously. But yes, I hope you all enjoy it. We'll have some discussions at the end of the session. You'll have the chance to jump off mute and we'll open up the floor. So thank you so much to our panel for joining, and thank you to everyone that's come along today.
Awesome. Thanks heaps, Jessica. And yeah, thanks heaps for inviting me to come along today and be part of this panel. I'm actually going to share my screen so that I can show you all some data and that kind of thing. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the ancestral lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal peoples from other areas of South Australia and Australia who are present today. So, is diversity in geosciences really a problem? Well, we know that geoscience needs creativity and innovation. Conversations I was having with the panel earlier today revolved around needing creativity and innovation in exploration so that we can actually increase our success in finding ore deposits. And we have an increasing awareness that diversity drives creativity and innovation. But is there, I'm just trying to move everybody so I can see my notes and it's not working. But there's more to diversity than just having a variety of people of different backgrounds and persuasions who are sitting around at the thinking table, so to say. And what we actually need is inclusion, because when we have inclusions, that's when the magic really starts to happen. So what I want to do today is actually present some qualitative and quantitative numbers regarding diversity and challenge you to actually think a bit about inclusion. This is a quote from a study that I'm going to go into a little bit later on. This gives insight into 25 years ago. This is a time when gender diversity, it wasn't such an identified issue as what it is today, and it was maybe even brushed under the carpet a bit. And what these quotes, these quotes are all from one person, one woman. It gives insight into how a minority can feel, even though they may not say it. What concerns me about this quote is that the person has said, "I have survived," when talking about their career, and this screams out to me that there's a problem. So do we want this type of environment to continue where people say that they are survivors? And another question that people might ask is, does it exist today? Well, here's another quote from our study. This is from a female graduate geologist who's less than 3 years into her geoscience career. I find that when I read this quote for the first time, I had to put the transcript down and I had to walk away because I just found it so confronting. This young woman is downplaying her femininity, and she's seeing uncertainty in where she herself actually fits into the geoscience profession, even as a new graduate. And so in research literature, this has actually been categorised as a double-blind dilemma, and it's where female behaviour is not valued and masculine behaviour is not condoned. So in this case, she's sitting there thinking, right, I don't want to wear the clothes that I might be comfortable in. I'm going to wear the clothes that I think that will not bring me attention, because I don't want that attention from that unwanted attention from men. A double-blind dilemma can hinder career progress, and we're seeing that in this young graduate. What it's also showing is signs of today's early career female professionals already feeling as though they need to survive the geoscience profession, which is very, very concerning. Let's have a look at some quantitative data, because I don't know about you, but I am much more comfortable looking at numbers. So if we look at the Australian mining sector, that's our graph on the left. we've got the males in blue and the females in orange, and we can straight away see that there's a lot less females within the Australian mining sector. There's around about 17% of employees across Australian mining industry are women, and many of these are actually in administrative roles. Females themselves, they represent a very small number of people in management positions. Within Australia, men hold around about 92% of all CEO roles in resources and mining, which is a pretty scary number. Most of those holding these operational leadership positions in the top 10 ASX listed mining companies actually started their careers from a technical leadership area. And that's an area such as your engineering, geology, geophysics, those kind of areas. And these are areas that are underrepresented by females. So we can see that this problem could continue into the future unless we do something about it. The graph on the right shows the numbers for academia. You can see that we've got the university graduates there, which, you know, even though it's not a 50-50 split, but we're doing all right. But females are still underrepresented, being 40% of that population. But then look at what happens. We go to level A is basically somebody straight out of their PhD. Level C would be a senior lecturer. Level E is a full professor. And you can straight away see that that orange line is going down, the blue line's going up, and there's a massive difference between the number of males and females who are employed at level E positions in Australian universities. But it's not like we're not doing anything. There's been a lot of positive change that's happened in the last few years and a lot of concerted effort. There's here's some examples here. For instance, BHP making a public commitment to having a 50-50 gender split across their employees by 2025. Rio Tinto, they're looking at increasing female representation on senior management by about 2% a year. And they're at around about a third representation on their executive committee. So a third of people are females. There's commitment to allowing gender diversity through things like improved paid parental leave for men and women. So an example from Rio Tinto again is that they now offer 18 weeks paid parental leave to both men and women on an equal basis, which is amazing. Universities are doing something about this, and women can take up to 6 months full paid parental leave. And then they're also doing things like a staged return to work, which really can help female academics return into the working environment. When we actually look at boards, the statistics of big companies at least, it'll be interesting to what Rick has to say later on. They're telling us something. So 46% of new board appointments at ASX miners between 2016 and 2017 were women. And in 2018, all miners in the ASX 200 had at least one woman on the board. So in those big companies, there's changes that are happening. We've also got organisations who are acting. They're looking to achieve Athena Swan accreditation. Athena Swan accreditation is more focused on higher education and research institutions. And what it does is it recognises an organisation's commitment to and their progress on equality and diversity, particularly around race and gender. And so these organisations are making a real concerted effort to get this accreditation, which is not an easy thing to do. So we've got all of this positive action. So why do we actually have a problem of gender diversity? What is causing it? What I'm going to show you now are some quotes from this study that I mentioned before, where those first two quotes from the talk came from. A brief description of this study. We interviewed about 68 Australian geoscientists, men and women, from academia, government and industry, and from different levels, so from junior through to senior. In those interviews, we asked people a bit of a fun question. We asked them to provide a metaphor describing their own career and then a metaphor describing the career of the opposite gender. And these are the quotes that you're seeing here today. We did look at gender only, and it's very simplified in that we only looked at gender in a binary entity. And the aim of the study was to really understand enablers and barriers of women to achieve leadership levels within the geosciences. What we see is that in some ways, we're the same. we're curious, we have a sense of adventure. Most of us find our careers challenging. Some of us are very frustrated, but we're a really determined bunch, and we're determined to get, to stay in this career or start in this career. Interestingly, when it comes to challenging, men acknowledge that women's careers are challenging, but women did not acknowledge that men's careers are challenging, even though the majority of men and women expressed elements of being challenged in their career. So that is something that is quite interesting in terms of perceptions. But then there's differences, and these differences are extremely concerning. The first difference I want to show you is around achievement. Achievement is important in a career because it brings a real deep sense of career satisfaction. And if you're achieving, it actually means that you get this overall enjoyment in your working life. And it means that you'll be highly motivated to actually pursue something that's really quite challenging. Of concern, only 33% of men expressed a sense of achievement around their careers. Even more concerningly, only 4% of women expressed that sense of achievement. Women instead expressed elements of their career being unpredictable and uncontrollable. These kind of elements were only expressed by women and not by men. But overall, that very low sense of achievement that was expressed is quite concerning, and it means that there's something that needs to change. Another thing that we looked at was a sense of belonging. A sense of belonging will impact on your self-esteem, having a sense of worth, and it will also impact on success. What we found was that women generally described men as being insiders. This actually happened a lot. And some of the quotes that we used were really, really confronting, to the point where I wasn't even comfortable to put them on these slides. Men described women as being outsiders, underrepresented, and having to meet higher expectations. So there's this real lack of a sense of belonging of women in a geoscience career. What that can tell us is that we have a problem with inclusion. That problem of inclusion and that sense of belonging, that's further highlighted by the fact that women are not expressing their sense of achievement in their career. But of course, that whole issue around achievement is even deeper, because only 33% of men express that sense of achievement. We also looked at the transcripts in terms of something called agency, and I don't mean like ASIO or the FBI or something like that. In a sociology world, agency it means achievement. So being competent, ambitious, task-focused, a person with agency has the inclination to take charge. So that they're like leadership qualities, as you might see them traditionally. Agency is a very defining characteristic of the male stereotype. There's really interesting contrasts in the way that men and women perceive and then are perceived and then perceive themselves in terms of agency. So women very often described men as being agentic, but they put a negative value on men's agency. On the other hand, when men described women as being agentic, they put a positive value on it. So there's this real contrast in the way that we're actually seeing each other. There was nobody who actually, when they were describing their own career, no one actually described themselves as having to be agentic. Agency is almost the opposite of what we call commonality. Commonality, it means concern for others, being warm, collaborative, respectful, having emotional sensitivity. It's a very defining characteristic of a female stereotype. And we recognise that modern leaders, they need to have these elements of both agency and commonality, or in other words, they need to have, our modern leader needs defining characteristics of both the male and female gender stereotypes. And these are recognised as positive qualities in our modern leader. But the comments on commonality in people describing careers of the opposite gender were rare. the one comment that did come that was relevant to commonality was actually from a woman describing a man's career. So there was no men who actually described women as needing to be or have elements of commonality. So it's a complex topic, this one. And, you know, as a geoscientist, not a sociologist, I'm really wrestling with it. What I'm really wrestling with is just how negative the agency characteristics of men were viewed by women, and how perceptions of agency and commonality within men and women may impact on women feeling that they're comfortable in pursuing a geoscience career, or whether this is a barrier. Furthermore, what I am also wrestling with is what's the impact on all of us, especially young geoscientists, feeling that we can actually bring our whole self to work. If we actually have those feelings that of commonality, but we see that we actually need to have strong agency, but that goes against the grain of us, then how does that actually play out in terms of us actually wanting to be ourselves at work and feeling as though that we can be included by being who we are? So overall, I think geoscience faces a real barrier in career perceptions. We're aware that there's a need for diversity and there's a lot of positive action in this place, but diversity is also a lot more complex than just gender, which is of course what I've focused on today and what we'll talk about a fair bit. What we really need is to be able to create that sense of belonging, achievement and satisfaction for both men and women. And I think that that's critical to be able to retain and foster diversity at all levels within the geoscience profession. In order to do that, we've got a long way to go before we can consider ourselves diverse, but also before we can actually consider ourselves to be inclusive. And I think that inclusion is the key part. That's the bit that is going to be a real challenge. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And what I'll do is I'll hand over to Rick, who's going to give us some thoughts next, and hopefully have some questions after everybody's finished. So thank you.
I think it's downhill, at least for the next few minutes, because I think Caroline gave an excellent and well-prepared presentation in contrast to mine. But I guess I wanted to say a few things on this. And I was very happy to contribute to this meeting, despite the fact that I'm now about to explain to you why I'm a hypocrite. So two things happened last year at around the same time. The University of Queensland proudly came out with an initiative linked to the Athena Swan program called the Merle Pledge. The Merle Pledge, which it was done in honor of Merle Thornton, who's one of the two people that we see on the left-hand side there. And there's an arrow at the bottom that actually shows the chain that's chaining their leg to the front bar at the Royal Exchange Hotel in Toowong, because they basically chained themselves to the front bar until they got served a beer. And in honor of that, we took the Merle. A lot of people at UQ took the Merle Pledge, which was we wouldn't organize a meeting or conference or attend or participate in a conference or panel that was 100% male. And I said, yeah, I'll sign up for that. That's great. And actually I was thinking at the time, you know, my mother was a civil engineer when no women were civil engineers, and she designed houses and taught math at university. And my sister is a senior academic who sadly for her took over online teaching at a Canadian university about 2 weeks before COVID took over. My wife was a historian, careers person, published on wage equality, Indigenous careers. My daughter's a senior lawyer, worked for Tenants Victoria. I'm all for this Merle Pledge. And then within a week, I'd sent out a webinar announcement that Helen and I organized for an industry innovation session. And the speakers were 4 blokes. And I actually got quite a few responses from people saying, looks like a great seminar. I can't come because it's all men. And I don't come to seminars that are all men. And I thought, I'm a hypocrite. And it really, it was a good lesson. And, we've really done our best ever since then to make sure that doesn't happen. And the only other thing I want to say before I get going into what I wanted to talk about was another great thing to watch. I just thought it was an excellent talk. Was Melanie Finch gave a seminar for our JKMRC weekly series a couple of weeks ago on a very related topic to this, or on this same topic. Essentially, I think her focus was why do women leave Earth Sciences, and I thought it was it was an excellent seminar and well worth watching. What Helen asked me to talk about as part of this, as part of my participation in this panel, is I guess my experience in a mixture of industry and academia, from the point of view of a male manager, in terms of gender issues that have arisen, and I'd have to say the first when I sat down and I thought, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. That's no problem. Then when I looked at my career from 1983 until essentially 2003, so the first 20 years of my career, I managed 0 females. I had I hardly worked with any. So when I was at Chevron, I think in Canada, I think there were 2 female geologists in another section somewhere. And when I was at Monash studying, there were certainly female PhD students, many of whom have gone on to do great things. I think Monash at the time had 1 and then grew to 2 female academic staff. The rest of the department was male. When I worked for MIM in Brisbane, there were a couple of women who were in the geology group. None were in my group, which was a sort of technical services area. So we worked together and had dotted line relationships, but I had no connection at all with women. So I guess the point here, I'm not going to labor all this, but the point is that it was so bad, there were so few women in Earth Sciences that it wasn't it wasn't something that you actually even thought about or considered. The one thing I would say is that at that time, Caroline, what you said really resonated, and that is that there were a few people who survived and thrived in that environment, and it would have been despite the environment rather than because of it. And I'll single out a couple. Alice Clark, who was the chief geologist of Mount Isa mine at a time when there were many geologists and huge programs and large budgets and huge tasks, and did that very well. And Alice has been a real example, I think, to a lot of women. And Leslie Wyborn, who I had the pleasure to work with in what was then BMR and then AGSO, was also a real leader who managed to do that despite, I guess, what would have been a very bulky environment at the time. I moved to a Canadian company after being I moved to Mexico, and I was in charge of our Central American exploration. We had zero female geoscientists. We had, I think, one female administrator, and that was the sum total of our connection there. I then moved to a Canadian junior, and we did have, actually, for the first time, capable and experienced female geoscientists. And again, the "I survived" term really stood out for me. There were the sort of things I recall that would have been along the lines of what Melanie Finch mentioned, the one of the yet another mark on the another sort of incident adding up to a loss of love for geology when people were, I recall times when people were negotiating with drill companies or something and having somebody say, "Oh, what's the problem? Are you having your period now?" And you're thinking, "Oh, God." Anyway, I'm not going to labor that, but it was the people who survived were the people who were able to stand that sort of, I guess that sort of situation. And then I moved to junior companies. I was running 2 junior companies on the ASX. We had no female geoscientists at all in Australia, again, female administrators, but we also had a subsidiary in Turkey. And surprisingly, the percentage of female geoscientists we had in Turkey was larger. And actually the treatment they received and respect they were given was probably greater than I would have imagined before I started working in Turkey. But even then, I think there were things that happened that the boss didn't get to hear about. I've got no doubt about that. In fact, I was considering doing one of these Mentimeter polls, especially when I see the size of the female audience on this thing, just to see how many of the female geoscientists in the audience would or wouldn't have had some sort of incident that was inappropriate, because I suspect it would be close to 100%. So, I mean, I guess there have been, in response to your request, Helen, what I would say is that I've never been involved in what you would say would be an extremely serious incident, but there have been small incidents all along, and I'm sure a lot of things that happened, of which where people either didn't do anything and left, or didn't do anything and pushed on, despite the fact that things happened to them that shouldn't have. What I wanted to talk about now was to move from an industry environment where I guess the main theme there was that the lack of women more than anything else, to talk about the environment that I've been in for the last 5 years, which is an academic one. And we've already seen one version of this, which is the gender balance in earth sciences. I think it's probably a little bit out of date compared to what was presented already. And I guess what I'm pretty proud of is that the W.H. Bryan Centre has a gender balance like this. So we're actually more females than males in the W.H. Bryan Centre. But actually, when you use the same sort of graph that was produced, looking at and breaking it down into level, I think what we've ended up with is a pretty typical pattern. And that is that, yes, we can maybe consider patting ourselves on the back, or at least feeling like some sort of progress has been made in terms of overall numbers. But the more important thing, and the thing that we still need to do, is to change that ratio going from A to E to one that is symmetrical, and not having female staff dominant at the bottom and male staff dominant at the top. Another thing that I wanted to talk about from the point of view of the Sustainable Minerals Institute is to look at the SFI Production Centres. And I actually went away and dug up some information from our records. So this was and when I say the SFI Production Centres, I mean it's the groups that I'm in charge of. So the W.H. Bryan Mining and Geology Research Centre, and the Julius Krushnit Mineral Research Centre. And that was the picture in those centers 5 years ago. And I should point out that the one level E female here was Alice Clark, who was the boss. And you can see there's a real dominance of males in the group. And that's our picture now. And that level E female is still Alice Clark. But I guess the thing to say, and again, I don't want to put us up as a great shining example, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Now what we need to do is make that graphic entirely symmetrical, both from side to side and equal from bottom to top. But what I then thought was, well, how did we improve? Or what people might be saying is, how did you actually go from the situation you're in 2016 to the situation we're in now? And the first thing I really thought hard about this. The first thing I want to say is that we absolutely did not display any favoritism for any role that was ever advertised. There was no conscious, picking of winners in order to balance a gender ledger. So this happened organically. But how did it happen organically? And I think one of the most important things is that even at this stage, what happened in 2016 was that seeds were sown, and we had 2, and then grew to 3 or 4 strong female leaders. And the strong female leaders attracted other female applicants for jobs, and also had a network that was more equitable in its gender balance. And I think that had a strong influence. I think about more recently, 2 jobs that we advertised this year. There's one, and granted, there were a whole bunch of other things that were different. There's one role that we advertised that I advertised, and we had to fight to get 1 female applicant. It was all the applicants were male, and then one of our senior female leaders advertised a role, and it was almost all women who applied. And so I don't know why that was. I'm passing on an observation. But the other interesting thing that I have to say is that talking to some of our one in particular of our groups, which is also quite dominated in a male-dominated profession, but a female majority group. When they advertise, what does happen when they interview candidates for roles is that they have a thing they call the knucklehead test. So after they interview someone, and this is a common thing, I guess, that groups do, is they think about from a cultural fit. One of the things you can't be in a group like that is a knucklehead, and I think that I don't know what the semantic relationship is between knucklehead and agency and self-belief and all that sort of thing, but I think there are connections there. What I want to do now, and I don't know how I'm doing for time, I suspect I've gone over, but the one thing I do want to talk about is another thing that I feel really strongly about, and this was already mentioned. Joe Kakuza earlier on, late in 2020, put out a report that I thought was really interesting, looking at the compositions of ASX boards or mining related boards. And I'm going to focus in on junior mining boards. And what you can see in this graph is that junior mining boards, ASX junior boards, have 5% female representation, and TSX junior boards have about 10% female representation. And when you take that a little bit further, that led me to want to take this a little bit further and say, well, what are the top 12 identities of TSX, ASX, AIM, and junior mining CEOs? And I used a JavaScript face generator to make these faces. These aren't real people or cartoons of real people. So number 1 is men named John. Number 2, men named Michael, Robert, David, Andrew, Peter are tied for 24 CEOs. Men named Mark, 19. Men named James, Paul, Stephen, Christopher, and in 12th, women. So of the 1,059 junior companies on the AIM, TSX, and ASX, 1.5% roughly, or just a little under 1.5% are women. And it reminded me of this saying from the liberation theologist. Basically, it's great to point that out, but what are we going to do about it? what do we have to do about this in order to make it better? And one thing I thought of, having been involved in founding and taking forward a number of different junior companies, is that there are a few different ways junior companies get founded, but one of those ways is that people, sometimes people put projects together and they promote them and do a listing based on those properties, and the first actual money that they bring in is when they actually list on the exchange. But another valid approach is that sometimes someone will be, and I've been involved in companies like this, someone will be identified as having a lot of potential and actually given seed investment by a fund or a high net worth individual and asked to go away and put together a portfolio of properties and take them forward into a listing. So they're essentially chosen on the basis of their strength. And if we had a group like that, if there was a group of high net worth individuals and investment funds who specifically built up a fund to support seed investment in high performing female geoscientists with all the right sort of experience, I have no doubt that we would find that they turned into a number of really high quality exploration groups. But the other thing I thought of when I looked at those figures was that we're complaining about discovery rates, but 98.5% of the exploration that we do is being carried out by 1/2 of 7.5% of the population, the male half of 7.5% of the world's population, and we're the ones that have been doing it for the past 80 or 90 years. So, it really makes you think that now's the time to bring in a group that may have and all the characteristics that Carolyn mentioned already that characterize men's approach to their careers also characterizes the way they run their junior exploration companies. And I think that we might find that if we had more companies that were more diverse and run by people with different backgrounds and female CEOs rather than male, that we might have a new a new improvement in exploration success. And the other thing I was thinking, and both of these things are things that I think we can take action on, would be to specifically organize training that would prepare women who were interested in running companies or who somebody tapped on the shoulder and said, have you considered doing this, to actually have workshops or training that would that would prepare give them more preparation to do that sort of role. So I think that's all I had to say, but a little bit disjointed, but I hope there were some little bits of information in there anyway. So thanks very much.
Now it's me, and thanks Rick and Carolyn, both of you, for setting the scene. Yeah. So I am, now I'm working off one screen here, and I've never actually tried to share my screen in a presentation with only my laptop instead of having multiple screens, but we'll do our best. So I am giving you, rather than a lot of research or facts and figures and hardcore information, I am going to be giving you my story and so more of the lived experience, I suppose. And let me just share my screen here. Is diversity in geoscience really a problem? Well, Rick and Carolyn have set the scene beautifully, I think, and I'm just going to pull out the little, I don't know how to do the proper presentation here. So ultimately, we've sort of come about this from the perspective of Russell Mears asked me to do a talk on diversity in geosciences recently for GeoHug. I said, well, I don't want to do that on my own. Far out, that's a really big topic. I knew that Carolyn was doing some research, and in fact, I know that I was one of the people that she interviewed as part of that research, and I was really pleased to be able to be part of that. And I've worked with Rick for a long time, and then we also got to know Rachel Durdin, who's going to be speaking after. So we've got all these different points of view, and this is my point of view and my story. So I put a post on LinkedIn, I think it was last week, for International Day of the Girl, and I've used the same photo here on the left to sort of start the journey. You know, I was a very shy child. I wanted to write stories. I had no interest in science or geology or anything like that. But when I was in high school, my school in Canberra was one of the only schools to do like a year 11 and 12 geology course. And there was a female teacher, which, you know, at the time didn't strike me as odd at all, but I just loved it. I loved learning about the history of the earth and how it all happened, and it went on for so long, and, you know, the evolution of life, the evolution of the planet, mountain ranges, oceans, you know, like it was just so big and so dramatic. I honestly, it just hooked my imagination, and it was really the storytelling aspect of geology that got me in. And so when I announced to my father that I was going to be moving to Sydney and studying geology at the University of Sydney up there, his response was, well, you can't do that because it's a male-dominated field and you will only ever be the token female. Which, you know, at the time was like, well, you know, secretly, fuck you. But I did it anyway. I went up to Sydney and I studied geology, and I won every single prize that the geology department there had to offer. I did field work. I went over to New Zealand to do my honours. So in the top right picture there, that's my supervisors, Jeff Clark, Keith Klappis, Richard White, who's now over in Germany. We flew around, we were in Fjordland, we had a great time. It was fantastic, and I loved it. And so then I thought, well, I'm going to go and do a PhD as well. So I went to ANU because one of the guys there sold me on this project where I was going to be going to Antarctica and studying these amazing rocks in Enderby Land, which is that little red slice there. And on the right, this is a scan out of because I don't have the pictures anymore, it's a scan out of my PhD, which is why it's a little wrinkly. The little tiny red dot, Dalwitz Nunatak, was where these ultra-high temperature metamorphic rocks were from. But I couldn't go there myself because the only people who were accessing that area at the time were the Japanese, because it's all, you know, in by boat, with the icebreakers, and they didn't allow women on their boat. So I got to use somebody else's samples that had been collected like 20 years earlier, and that wasn't anywhere near as exciting. But the rocks were very cool, and I still loved the work that I did. And I got to go to Norway instead to do actual field work on some other rocks there and sort of compare, contrast. I didn't get to go on an icebreaker. I didn't get to fly around in a helicopter like I did in New Zealand for honours. I got to hire a rent-a-wreck because I was under 25 and the insurance was too much to hire a nicer car. So that's what I got for my fieldwork driving around Norway, and I had so many rocks in the back that it was like bottoming out on the bumps and scraping on the ground. Anyway, so it was fantastic. I loved it. The rocks were cool. Norway's beautiful. If anyone ever gets to go there, you should. But PhD, you know, it's a long and arduous process, and the relationship between you and your supervisor can be pretty, intense at times. And towards the end of my PhD, so coming up to 4 years, I know now that my supervisor actually had a little bit of a breakdown, and there were all sorts of other things going on in his life. But one of the things that really affected me was at one point he told me that I was too stupid to do a PhD and that a second year undergrad could do better. And I took that on. I did sort of manage to pull myself together and finish the PhD, and then I went to the University of Calgary in Canada to do a postdoc, and which was amazing as well. But I was frozen. I'd have all this data that I'd be working on, and I'd be trying to make an interpretation, and I would have all these panic attacks that I couldn't possibly interpret the data properly. I wouldn't be able to make the right decision about this data because I was too stupid. So that actually really did put an end to my, we'll flush that one down the toilet there, put an end to my academic career. I did the postdoc, it was great, but ultimately ended up back in Australia and kind of ran away to the mining industry. So here I am in WA. I was living in Melbourne at the time, working up in WA, fly in, fly out to a little gold mine up near Port Hedland. And you can see the management team there on the right. I'm the only female, but that's okay. You know, one of the things that I really valued about this experience actually was that it was completely out of my comfort zone. I remember walking into that mining camp when I first arrived, and it was dark and nighttime by the time I'd sort of travelled from Melbourne to Perth up to Port Hedland and then drive out to the mine site. And just these crusty old men sitting there cracking jokes about the young woman that's arrived on site, and it was terrifying. And I just thought, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? But we got to know each other. They got to know me. I got to know them. They, you know, by and large, the 99% of them were fantastic. They supported me. They, you know, taught me the ropes, that kind of thing. They also pulled me down off my horse, and I really learnt to value the input of people whose experience is different to mine. So people who don't have PhDs, people who, you know, maybe they never finished high school, they're physical people, they're working in the dirt, they're doing this, but they know about their stuff. They can fix an engine, they can grade a road, they can, I don't know, all the different skills that go into a mine site. And I learnt so much, and I really, I think that's when I came to appreciate the huge variety of human beings that are in the mining industry and how fantastic they all are. I don't know that learning went back the other way. I don't know that they appreciated my experiences and what I had to, but anyway, that's okay. It was my experience, and that's what I got out of that, which I still take with me to this day. After Port Hedland, I ended up in Mount Isa, and I did see actually some of my Mount Isa friends on the list in the audience, so it's good to see a few names there. But Mount Isa was fantastic. It was the landscape was so different to the Pilbara. You'd think it would all be the same. I thought the outback would all be the same, but no, it's hilly and it's quite dramatic in its way. I had a really great time. I worked with some amazing people. You can see some of the team there. I worked for a couple of different companies, but they were just really, really wonderful people. And again, learnt a lot, learnt a lot more about managing people rather than just being a geologist, which is really valuable. And that's what I do every day now instead of real science. So that really set me on that path. But after a couple of years up there, it was all going really well. I had a great career. I was earning good money. And then I got pregnant. So, a uniquely female problem if we're talking about women in geosciences. So I was still out in the field. It was getting pretty hot. My daughter was born in November. So the last couple of months were, I have to say, a little bit of a struggle. if any of you have ever been pregnant, you'll know that it's like having your own little internal combustion engine. So it's very easy to overheat. But, you know, that was fine. I had sort of negotiated with the mine manager that since I was really doing a lot of managerial stuff by then, that I could just continue to do that and work from home after I'd had my baby. And at the same time, I guess, and you know, this I'm giving you the honest version of my life. This isn't the politically correct or the rose-coloured glasses version. At the same time, the boyfriend who, you know, was the father of this baby, decided he didn't really want to be a father. So we split up. But at the time I thought, well, that's okay. I'm in a great job. I'm working with all these fantastic people. Got this arrangement where I'll be able to work from home. I'm on really good money. Yeah, it'll be fine. I can do this on my own. But it didn't really work out that way. So there was a change in management, and once I finished my maternity leave, the company said that I could no longer work for them because I couldn't be fly in, fly out. So I lost my job, and at the same time, this is now 2012, the downturn at that time was really taking effect. So I couldn't actually get another job, particularly not with being a single mum with a baby. So I had to take stock, and I had to think, well, what am I going to do now? So I decided, well, I'll do consulting. That way I can work from home and, you know, do the hours that I want, and it'll be fine. So there's my little company logo there. But it doesn't really work that way in real life. You can't just decide to be a consultant and all of a sudden you're making a living being a consultant. It takes a long time to build up a client base and to make a name for yourself and all of that sort of thing. So at about the same time, I decided I'm going to remake my life as well, leave Melbourne. I really had no reason to stay in Melbourne. And I moved up to the snow because I love the snow. I love mountains. That was where I had always wanted to end up. And my family were all still in Canberra. So if I lived in the snow, then I'd at least be, you know, within sort of an hour and a half, 2 hours drive of them. So, so here we are in the snow. Lily's on skis at about 1.5, and it was lovely. It was a really great life, I have to say. It was a beautiful place to live. I utterly loved it. Consulting slowly picked up. Took my daughter on a few trips to drill rigs and site visits. So this is actually a trip to Adelong, and I had her in childcare in Gundagai. So I'd be driving to and from this site and picking her up in the evening and that sort of thing. I can't actually remember this fieldie's name, but he was really lovely. And everywhere we went, people were supportive. You know, the drill crews just thought it was fantastic that I was bringing this child with me. And look, by and large, everyone was very supportive of this kind of unique way of doing things. But I still wasn't making enough money to live. Basically, I had consulting jobs, I had stuff to do, but I needed a bit more. It was very few and far between, you know, there was still a downturn. So this is in Genderbine. I redid my CV. I took out all the stuff about how many degrees I had and all my experience and all the things that meant anything to me, dumbed it all down and took it around to the local cafes and shops. And the reason I've got this up here is that it was utterly humiliating. I can remember walking into that bakery, the Sundance Bakery. They had a big sign in the window, you know, staff wanted. I didn't have childcare for Lily, so she was on my hip, and I've got this copy of my CV in my hand. I gave it to the lady, and she just had this really cursory look at it. I can't even remember exactly what she said, but I can remember how it made me feel. And that was just, wow, you know, you have made me feel like shit. So she didn't want me. I was, you know, I don't know, overqualified. What was wrong with me? Blah, blah, blah. It was yuck. I pulled myself together. thought I'm just going to drop my CV at the bookshop, the little snowprint bookshop in Jindabyne, and they ended up offering me a job, which was great. But it was only like one shift a week, so 3 hours, it was like $70 a week or something. It was nothing. But the network, the people that I was friends with in Jindabyne, it's all about your support network, I think, when you're faced with these kinds of situations. So a friend of a friend had an online mosaic tile shop and a big warehouse. And so she gave me a job, and I ended up working there a lot and packing orders for her online business. But she was a really, really driven businesswoman, and she's like, right, we're going to figure out what's the strategy that you need to make a successful consultancy. What's your market? How do you connect with your market? She had all this great advice, which, you know, like I was a geologist, I had no idea about business, business acumen, or how to market yourself or anything like that. She helped, she got me out there. So then I started networking my ass off, and in geology, it is all about face-to-face networking. You can't just have a website and think that, you know, you can do some Google searches, and people don't find consultants by doing a Google search. So these are a few pictures from various diggers and dealers. I went to Sydney Mining Club. I went to anywhere where I could go and talk to people. There's also a picture I was, you know, also doing a little bit of consulting still, like there were dribs and drabs. So here I am at ANU doing some laser ablation analyses of some sulfides, which I thought was really cool because I hadn't done that since I was my PhD. So it was fun to be doing that kind of thing as well. But there was a cost to that, you know, all that travel, young child at home. My mother looked after her an awful lot. She had so many sleepovers, all these people that don't give their children sleepovers till they're much older. My daughter was having sleepovers from the age of 1 with all sorts of people. But, you know, then I'd get these photos of notes. So, you know, there's a cost to being away from your child as well. And through those networks and various things, I ended up coming across this junior gold exploration company in Jindabyne. They were really dodgy, but there were some great people there as well. So, you know, some friends in the bottom corner that I'm still in close contact with, and we stay in touch. There's pictures of, you know, drill rigs in snow because it was kind of unique and cool. Still dragging Lily out to the rig, you know, if I had to visit on the weekend or something. And so she's looking particularly grumpy in that picture. But it was half an hour out of town. I could work for them part-time. I could do the hours that I needed to do. I could still be home every night for my child. So it was the sort of thing where I think you don't give up. You just keep pushing for the things that you want and the things that you need. Yeah, and then there's the little one in the office learning how to use a hand lens. Apparently rocks are really boring, so she ended up looking at something colourful instead through that hand lens. But, you know, children at work, it happens, and you do what you've got to do. So after a few years in Jindabyne, there's always a personal side to every story. So by this stage, I had a partner who wasn't scared of me and wanted to stick around, but he happened to live in Brisbane. So we decided that we'd leave Jindabyne and move up to Brisbane. So here we are with the giant unicorn in the car, ready to drive away. And my plan was as well that the company that I was working for was pretty dodgy, and I thought, well, I'll just get up there, I'll get everybody settled, get it all sorted, and then I'll start looking for another job. Within a month of arriving in Brisbane, I found out that I had breast cancer. So that kind of put a stop to looking for a new job. And the shit part of it, it was a tiny little lump, and we got rid of it and it was fine. You know, the whole thing took about 6 months. But the shit part of this was that the company that I was working for did not want me to take sick leave. And I kind of think, you know, if you're going to take, it wasn't like I had a cold. If you're going to take sick leave at any time in your life, surely cancer is an okay reason to take sick leave. The reason that they gave me was that there was nobody else, because it was a tiny little company, there was nobody else in the company who could act as a competent person for ASX releases. So if I was out of action, then they couldn't be releasing anything to the ASX. Ultimately, it's my life, and I needed that time. So as soon as I felt well, I started applying for jobs and ended up where I am now at the Geological Survey of Queensland, which has been fantastic. Here's a picture of me actually getting out in the field with some of the people earlier this year, actually, which was really fun. There's Janelle and Paul and Roger on an MT survey. And I'm not going to say the government is perfect either. Government does aim to be sort of, have a high standard of employment and diversity. And yet, one of the first things that was said to me by an ex-staff member now was, "Oh, well, you're obviously a woman who enjoys being a woman." And he left soon after that, thank goodness. And I can remember sitting in executive team meetings where the diversity numbers for the department were being shown, and look at this, it's so great. We've got, or in Georesources at least, we've got 50% women in the Georesources division, and yet I was the only female in the executive team meeting. And so having to sort of call them out on that and say, hang on, guys, like Rick was talking about, there's a real skew to that data. There are no senior women. They're all in administrative or secretarial roles. And I know in my team, I've got 16 people in my team, in the minerals team at GSQ. And aside from myself, up until only a few weeks ago, there were 2 women. We've recently hired a third, but she's stuck in Sydney, so hopefully she can join us soon across the border. But so look, even in government, it's not perfect. But I think the difference for me is that it's taken me several decades. I'm now 45. I've had a bumpy road along the way, but I now have the confidence to say, that's not right. I'm standing up for this person. I'm standing up for myself, and make those calls, support women where I see it needs to be supported, support men, support anybody that needs support, and be a voice. But it took me a long time to have that confidence, and I think that's one of the things, if I could go back and say to myself, when I didn't have the confidence to go to Fair Work because I lost my job with a baby, because, I couldn't be flying out anymore. I wish I could have had that confidence. I have it now, but I certainly didn't have it then. I didn't have it after my PhD either. And that changed the whole course of my career. I love the mining industry. It's given me so much. But 20-something years ago, I was going to be an academic. I wasn't going to work in industry. Mining, that's so bad, Whereas now I feel like I'm making a real difference. I'm championing, the energy transition and supporting the mining industry to be a real part of that solution, and being a voice for the resources sector. And I love that. I love that about my job. I love my work every single day. So I don't want anyone to think that I've had a really bad trot, because I haven't. It's given me so much. But like Rick said, if you did a poll, every woman's got a story in our industry, and that was mine. So thanks, everybody.
I know, and I don't know why Helen thought she didn't need the time herself and why she needed to bring her friends, because there's a big story there, and I think you could have spent the whole time talking about it. So thank you for sharing it. I think sometimes sharing stories, it takes a lot of courage. And what you've been through and all of that. So I'm going to keep it short because I know we don't have too much time. I have no slides. It's Friday afternoon. We've all watched too much of our work TV this week, I'm sure. And firstly, I would actually just like to say that diversity is a problem everywhere. It's not just in geosciences. It's not unique to geosciences. It's everywhere through the industry. It's in many other male-dominated industries, traditional industries. So I just want to thank everyone for coming along today, and also especially the men. I think it's really important that men, I guess, participate in these conversations and learn and listen as we do. But as we say, I think I'm sitting here today, or standing here at my desk late in the Friday afternoon, in the Turrbal and Jagera people country, just in Brisbane. And what I really love about it, and I'm going to join two stories here together and do an acknowledgement of country all at the same time, hopefully, is that talking about supporting women, I signed up to do a 3-day bike ride, 300 Ks in 3 days with 35 of my new best friends, who are all women, which is great. And I will put in the chat the donations, so feel free to make a donation. We're raising money for 2 charities, kids charities, and also schools programs to prevent domestic violence through White Ribbon, which would be great. But what it's actually doing is giving me the opportunity to see Brisbane, see the hills of Brisbane, go along the river, see the bay. So you get to see the land and the sea and how it's been looked after and cared for, over countless thousands of years. And I, having that beautiful experience, just want to thank and pay my respects to past traditional owners and custodians of the land, plus the present and also into the future, because we're just so privileged to live in different places where we are and have those experiences. And I think, Helen, a couple of weeks ago, we went out past where you work and actually stopped in the car park to regroup at the top of the hill. I think that's where you work. So, it's so what I'd like to talk to you today about is just 2 really quick things. One, it's about supporting women, and I want to use that as a positive experience. So I'm in a live case study at the moment that I'm not aware of. I wasn't aware of when I signed up for this bike ride. We're doing a 10-week training program with these women. So we turn up every Wednesday, Friday and Saturday together and spend a lot of hours together. There's women from mining, there's women from energy, there's women from professional services, real estate, all sorts. They're sort of senior women in their fields, and everyone's at different levels of capabilities and skills and fitness levels, different times in their life. But what's actually happening in front of us is that you've got an environment that there's respect, there's teamwork, and I think Caroline mentioned those, some of those elements in some of the slides of what brings together that right inclusive environment, and I'm experiencing that, and I'm watching. It's not an experiment. We're raising money for significant money for these charities and getting fit at the same time. But when you're in the environment going through adversity together and supporting each other, the things that you can achieve are astronomical. We're climbing mountains and, 7 weeks ago, I had no idea that I'd actually have the skills and capability to do, let alone support other people as you go up the hill. So it's creating those. And I guess my call out is that we do need to look for the opportunities in this industry, but also, wherever we can, to create that for women to thrive. And whether that's giving someone an opportunity or even thinking about what we're going to be saying. So, at the moment, I'm sure we're all aware of what's happening in the Pilbara with the, sexual harassment, sexual assault and the parliamentary inquiry. To me, that's a fundamental issue of disrespect. So if we were to take anything away from here, is respect those people around us and really think about how we can include them. And so respecting could be, and it's not just opening a door. It happened to me when I joined Rio Tinto. All these wonderful men open doors, but now we've cracked the lid on the can to find out what the culture's really like, and the bullying, the racism, and the sexual harassment and assault. It's disastrous, and it's the same at BHP. It's the same anywhere that we have that. So we as individuals, and the 50 of us on the call tonight, I think have a responsibility and to support other people around us, men and women, but also call out, and I call out to the men especially, if you hear a sexist remark or a bad joke, just stop and pause and think, is that the right thing to do? Would I like that to happen to a female, someone in my network, my wife, my daughter, my sister, and just sort of try and put yourself in that, because looking at Helen's pictures, I don't think I saw one with 2 women in there. I think they were all just Helen and the rest of the blokes. And I'm seeing a few nods here, and you can see that. But when my experience now is when you get a cohort of women together, you actually can achieve amazing things. So look for the opportunities to increase the representation of diverse people, but make it respectful and inclusive. We've got a long way to go. We're not going to hit our targets of 2% this year, I'm pretty sure. BHP have moved away from their 50-50, which they say was never a target. It's 40-40-20 now, which is sort of a standard one that one of the investor groups are pushing out. Targets do work. So even in your own little teams, if you do have a target, because when you set yourself a target, if you want to get meters in drilling, you generally hit them, don't you? So if you want to get a better, diverse team, having targets as little or as big as you like, because then you're going to be looking for different talent. And whether it's someone from Mongolia or a female from Mount Isa, if you're not looking for that talent in a different lens, you won't actually attract it and you won't get it, and then your team won't be as rich as what it is. But I realise that we've only got 8 minutes, and I want to open it up, Jess, for questions. Just as a guest, but thank you. I'm not a geologist or from Geosciences, but I've got a lot of great friends that are, and I always get excited when they come along to sessions with a bunch of geos. So thanks for having me.
I can't thank you all enough for coming on today. It's been really powerful and eye-opening hearing from each and every one of you. So thank you so incredibly much for doing that. I really, really appreciate it.